Hey, yo, and welcome to the AWO Journeyman podcast, a podcast where we have been waiting for the Uke to come back. I am JD, the Blues fan who has been finally entered well and truly into the Vortex, and now not even sure where we're going to end up. Joining me as usual is my good mate Nate, the Pies fan who, as usual, is looking down from above, telling everybody to sort their shit out. How you doing, Nate?
Yeah, sort your shit out, people. This is getting ridiculous.
Just sitting there as top of the world. Kane Corn said today that there is something would have to go horribly wrong for you to lose this premiership.
Yeah, such as choking in September, which I'm firmly used to, but we'll get to that point in a couple of months.
Why worry about the hypothetical what-if bullshit before you have to?
Yeah.
And joining us for a second week is, I'm going to say back by popular demand, is Jabs, the Essendon fan who, let's be honest, Jabs, you had probably one of the worst nights of your life last night watching that game.
That was quite miserable, yeah. As I said, when's cricket back? It's Tuesday or Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah, you'll be. Don't worry, mate. It's back soon enough. You can distract yourself with the Ashes once again.
Beautiful. That's all I need.
Interesting round of football this week. So, boys, let's talk some footy.
I have a question about the Vortex. What would you prefer, the 4 points or the 2016 premiership? Because the Dogs can celebrate the 2016 premiership all they want, but the Swans have the 4 points from Thursday night, and I know which one I would prefer.
Oh, I mean, for this year, absolutely.
But I'm shocked as well. Sydney won a scrap without the need of an interchange steward. They won a scrap. I can't believe it. They're back.
Well done, Sydney. I mean, let's get straight into it. Thursday night football. Is this the last Thursday night football for the year, or we got one more?
No, I think that's it.
Let me just double check. Let me do one more quick check. No, that was it. That's it for Thursday night football. So Nate's gonna. To be fair, Nate's gonna be firmly excited. We'll get into that after the podcast for you, Jabs. But 11-12-78 played 11-10-76. Sydney by 2 points, as Nate said. Swans winning it in an absolute. Swans won a scrap. They got themselves over the line at the SCG. It was a bit of an odd game on Thursday night that just sort of got itself to a point where, oh geez, I'm already waffling. I can't even get myself.
You can describe this match in one word. Describing this match in one word: Vortex. That's all you need to describe it as.
The only other word I was going to say chaotic, but
I mean, Vortex is a perfect word for it. But let me just go into one player and one player only, just for my sake.
Riley Garcia, go ahead.
Errol.
What a boy.
What a boy. Just being named Errol makes him a boy, purely. Another amazing performance from Errol Goulden. He's just been one of their absolute shining lights this season. They actually had a few more, how I reckon a few weeks ago we were talking about how Swans forward line, what we were like, what next after Buddy? I do reckon Joel Amartey really did step up to the plate and basically say, you know what, I'm here, I'm capable. He only kicked 1 goal, but he was very prominent up forward, and it looked more dangerous than he has probably at various points of this year. Big night though for Tommy Papley.
Did you hear it was his birthday?
Oh, good to see though. 4 goals too. Big performance from the Pap smear. He basically willed them over the line. What are your thoughts on this game?
What more can Bontempelli do for the Dogs? Did you see after the game? He threw his mouth guard to the ground. He was absolutely furious.
He's been trying to will them over the line at various occasions, and he's just not being able to do it. And you can see the frustration because as we mentioned a while ago, they were banging on the door of the top eight, top four, and it was like, as we made a joke, they're allergic to it. They get and now we're worried that they're going to get allergic to the top eight because it's becoming dire for the Dogs. Actually, it's as I said to you, Nate, last night. There's a vortex inside the vortex. So now the Giants, St Kilda, Western Bulldogs, and Essendon have formed their own mini vortex. Where let's see what happens there with people flying around, because at the end of next week we could have Giants as high as 6 spots. So
we've got the Dogs next Friday night, and it's just turned into an 8-point game just on the back of this week.
Massive game next weekend.
Thing about the Dogs, though, I think from last week's game against the Pies and this game as well, combined game time of being in front is about 60%. So they've squandered 8 points in the past 2 weeks. They could easily be equal fourth with Melbourne on percentage, but now they're teetering in 8th spot. And again, an 8-point game against the Dons, and I think they've got the Giants in 2 weeks. So season-defining games for them. We're none the wiser on the Dogs. I'm going to put a line through the Dogs for the premiership anyway. It's unfortunate for guys like Bonts, English, Libba, McRae, Norton, Ugelhagen, but it's the bottom 6 players they've got that aren't going to will this team over the line to win a premiership at this stage. It's guys like Garcia, for example. Riley West can't cement a spot either. They don't know who to pick between Darcy and Lobb. O'Donnell as well. It's these sort of players aren't going to get them to another premiership, unfortunately.
It just makes you question, like, is Darcy ready though? Like, is he better off developing in the twos for the rest of the season at this point, or is it worth him coming in for Lobb and investing the future in Darcy?
Well, he's now got another injury concern as well, Darcy. And if you know anything about Darcy, he had a lot of injury concerns pre being drafted, and now it's he's starting to have some of those injury concerns in his career. So
his father's career ended early because of injuries. So
he only had 2 touches on Thursday night, and that's something where, again, a lot of Dogs fans probably would say Rory Lobb hasn't been perfect, but he's been playing a role, and Darcy to try and bring Darcy in this late in the year and try and make him just immediately play that role, I think was it's a bit unfair to a kid like that, especially because of how experienced Lobb is in. And I got to admit,
that's what I was about to say. I think Lobb should be copping a bit more flack, because Lobb, for someone who's come across with experience at 2 different football clubs, he's come across as someone who I don't want to ruck, but I'll do the job if I have to. The man does not perform. He's the Bulldogs version of Wiedemann.
Yeah, that is a perfect assessment of Rory Lobb. I mean, we've already discussed on the podcast that we're not fans of him anyway because of the way he left Fremantle. I mean, having a house bought in Melbourne before you had even had the deal completed was already the big dog move.
Yeah, I understand if Maso is not happy about that. Shout out to Maso. I hope he's enjoying his newborn baby.
He's been giving you his blessing for you on the podcast, so he's. I mean, I should have said earlier on the Freo fan, but he shout out to Maso. We'll get into him a bit later because I'm sure poor Nate's going to either tear shreds through him or give him a love letter of "I'm sorry." There's no in between, I don't think.
You got that right.
But back to Thursday night, just quickly. I do think that just on Darcy, I think as we were sort of saying, I think it was just unfair on the kid to sort of come in and play that Lobb role. Where, like, yes, we are sort of picking on Lobb a little bit in saying that, he was, but like he wasn't really performing. But at the end of the day, he was probably playing a bit of a role that was required for the Dogs. And, I got to admit, Lobb at the moment is quite durable. And obviously he's just going to come straight back in next week anyway. So Still a lot of questions around the Dogs entering the final part of the season, and the Swans just keeping their season alive. You didn't want to write them off until this game happened, and what do you know? You're probably right. They are still just in the hunt. It's still going to take a mighty effort having that draw, and realistically, it's only potential that based on losses that, you know, it's going to be hard to sneak in from their point of view, but, you know, everything's still possible.
They've got a modest fixture, but no Rampy for 2 weeks, which is going to hurt them. He missed a good chunk of this season with a neck injury, which correlated to their dip in form. So the next 2 weeks, very shaky for the Swans. Same as what it was Thursday night. They lose against Freo, you can write them off.
Any news on the Pelican as well? Because he was also subbed off injured, so...
Lewis Melican is Lewis Melican.
So, you know, good chance they could be down 2 defenders there. So, not too good for the Swans heading into the late part of the year.
Bombers have got the Swans in 2 weeks. Rampy being out just means that someone's not going to climb a post. So
I was just about to say, that's brilliant. But we'll move on to a thriller on Friday night.
Draw FC robbed.
It was the draw watch should have been created this night.
Very, very late though. I sent it very late.
Very late. I mean, very fair though.
Good start to the week, though. Over the first 2 games of the season, average margin is 1.5 points. That's a great way to start a week of footy.
Oh, and it was like I said, an absolute thriller on Friday night at the MCG. 16-9, 105. Played 16-8, 104. Melbourne by a point. Brisbane basically lost the unlosable.
7 goals in the third quarter, absolutely demolished Melbourne, and looked like they were going to run away with it by at least 5 to 8 goals, and just completely fell apart trying to protect the game.
There was a good point made by Stevie J this morning that they probably parked the bus a little bit too early, and they parked it about 5 minutes out to try and stop any form of scoring to happen there. And Melbourne just took full advantage of it. You got to give absolute props to Jake Melksham. Come of the moment, come of the boy.
You've been Melksham before.
Oh, he absolutely turned up to play.
He turns up in clutch moments, John. You should remember all too well.
I mean, you want to laugh? Blocked out of the memory.
I was there that night. It lives well and truly rent-free in my head that night. It was grouse.
It's fair. But I mean, I'll just mention one thing to you. Andrew Walker, Jake Carlisle.
I was there that night. I was there that night too. That is the best mark I've ever seen. Hands down. That goes down as better than any mark I've ever seen.
But we'll get back to Friday night, where Max Gawn, I think, led from the front for Melbourne. Kicked one of the highest goals I think I've ever seen in AFL at the end of the third quarter. That thing looked like it went... BT said it went double the goalpost. Christian Petrarca going into the forward line the last 2 weeks has been a masterstroke.
I swear to God, if Cooper Gretsch does not put him in his team of the week again, I swear to fucking God, that sock wanker may get a punch in the face by me.
My notes on this game were Max Gawn, Christian Petrarca, Jake Melksham, and Viney again. Viney, we said last week, is in career best form. He proved it again on Friday night. He was immense. Melksham showed up in that last 10 minutes in clutch moments, took that mark on the wing that set up a goal, and then takes that juggles that mark and sends it right, and just has balls of steel. Absolutely nails that last kick for goal. Can we get onto Markgate?
No, it was 50-50, or it's a free kick to lever. It was not.
Yeah, exactly. If it wasn't a lever mark or free kick, it's a ball up.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
I know Brisbane fans were saying it was a hipwood mark, like as it happens. If they were saying that the morning after, then they got rocks in their heads.
Yeah,
half a lemon.
A half a lemon, yeah. I've got fucking half a lemon in my head right now.
Because immediately when I saw people complaining about that, my first reaction was like, live, it looked like it was a 50-50 call, ball it up.
Yeah, it didn't look like it was anyone. It looked like one of those ones again. It was just either a 50-50 or I actually probably leaned more to Lever anyway, just based on the way it was. They were both arrived at the ball and Lever just realistically ripped it out of his hands. I mean, we've seen that paid as a mark many a time. Again, 50-50, play on or ball it up. I thought this game was well and truly done in the third. I thought, yep, Brisbane have just done what they did to them at the Gabba. They've run over the top of them. And I thought Melbourne, yep, they might junk time a few of this, but not like this. This was junk time taken to a whole new level. This was turning junk time into a game, basically. So Melbourne get a crucial 4 points to keep their top 4 hopes basically almost sewn up. Geelong is still knocking on the door of the top 4, which is crazy to say at this point. But it's going to take a lot for Melbourne to drop out at this point. I think that based on how close they've pushed themselves to Brisbane, and I think Brisbane still potentially have a loss in them as well before this season's out. Just a very crucial win for Melbourne.
The Lions have the Cats next week at the Gabba. Now, fortunately, it's at the Gabba, but every season the Lions will lose at least one game at home. That could be it. They've also got to play Collingwood again. It's a marble, though, but they'll match up well against them. The Saints, even though they're shaky, they got them at the Gabba as well. So they've got some tricky games for the remainder of the season to,
I personally reckon that's right. I personally reckon the top 4 is pretty much shored up after that win, though. Melbourne's pretty much they've while they're still at that top end of the Vortex. I feel like with their run in home and the rest of the top 4's run in home, I can't see them dropping out of the top 4 anytime soon. Which that just means that 5 to 8 just got to actually bring their A game for the rest of the season, which pretty much generally happens around this time of year anyway. So, which I'm kind of since the top 8 can be shaped by all the way down to Carlton at the moment, Sydney, Freo. It just means it's going to be an interesting last few weeks of the year. So it makes it better than the last few years. So the question then is: Fagan the man to take this team to a flag?
Yeah, I still think he does. I still think he can, sorry. They've lost 14 of the last 15 games at the MCG. I don't think it's a hoodoo. I really don't think it's a hoodoo. It's a ground that they can't play on. It's a ground they can't run out games on. It's just 14
of the last 15 does suggest that it means that they're not fit enough to play on the G, and that's something they obviously, because you will play on the G. The G is where you're going to play majority of the major finals, grand finals. If you play against Collingwood, for instance, where they might be looking at at the start of the final series, they've got to be able to get through that. They can't just say that. I think Fagan said in his post-match interview that I reckon we'll be able to work through that. It's you need club psychologists to work on this, because at this point, with how many you've lost, it's something that's not sustainable to just say, oh, it's just a thing. The club psychologists might want to start talking to the players and asking them about what their issues with the MCG is, or what happens when they go into those sorts of games, and how they can change the mindset going into that.
I think their last 6. They lost to Richmond last year. They faded out. They beat Melbourne at the MCG semi-final. That was the opposite of a fade out. Then they got smashed against the Cats. They faded out against Hawthorn. They faded out here against Melbourne. I think when it comes to the big games, they will step up. They won't fade out. That's why I've got a little bit of confidence in Brisbane when it comes to finals. They will win a game at the MCG. If they face Melbourne again at the MCG come finals, I think they can take it on. They can get the win over them. And I think if they face Collingwood at the MCG, big game in September, they'll win that game as well. A good example would be Sydney in 2012 when they won the flag. They lost 14 of their last 15 heading into the 2012 grand final. So it presents as a hoodoo, but it's possible to overcome it on the big stage. I know West Coast winning in 2018, they had issues at the MCG prior to 2018, but having the new stadium at Optus, similar dimensions to the MCG, they turned their fortunes around the MCG and they won more games at the G, and it's what got them over the line at the MCG. I won't talk more about the MCG hoodoo for Brisbane at this point, but Brody fucking Grundy getting rocks.
How does he get back into that team now as a ruckman?
He gets traded to Port.
I
have a theory.
I heard that floated around.
I have a theory. I don't think he was dropped to focus on his forward craft. There's two particular ruckmen that Brodie Grundy doesn't play well against: Scott Lycett and Oscar McInerney. I reckon Brisbane hid Brodie Grundy.
There's a third. He's called Andrew Phillips.
That as well. But that's more of a 2-on-1. I don't think he's ever lost 1-on-1 against Phillips, but against Lycett and McInerney, he struggles. He gets exposed.
Last two Anzac days, I thoroughly remember Brodie Grundy getting exposed by Phillips. Phillips had a much better game, and just by running him around the ground. And that's Andrew Phillips. Brodie Grundy seems to have an issue when his opposition ruckman seems to run him around the ground and doesn't let him run loose. When Brodie Grundy gets a chance to run loose, he dominates. If his direct opponent decides to run off of him and to go get his own ball and to go impact on the contest more than him, that's where he seems to struggle.
I can't give you last year's Anzac Day though. I reckon he played a great final quarter to get Collingwood over the line, but that's Brodie at Collingwood. I want to stick to Brodie at Melbourne.
Yeah.
Watch this space. I reckon he comes back in a lot sooner than Melbourne are harping on. Given their messaging about Clayton Oliver's injury, I think Brodie Grundy is going to come back in a lot sooner. I reckon they just hit him from Brisbane.
Interesting argument either way, because do you bring him straight back into the team when Gawn operates so well as sole ruckman or not?
I was just about to bring that up. No, you can't bring him in straight away unless they've got a height issue. But I don't think it's going to be the case next week.
And you don't want to take Gawn out of that ruck role where he thrives on being that sole ruckman and being able to impact the contest that much.
And you can't be paying 700, 800 grand a year to have Grundy as your backup ruck. No way.
Speaking of having some new ruck issues, Freo have got some new ruck issues to add to their list. So we're going to move on to Saturday at the MCG. So we're poor Freo, man. Poor Freo. So 18-5, 113, played 10-7, 67. This was just a pretty dog day out for Freo. Two big injuries. Sean Darcy and Braden Walker. That Walker's injury was gruesome to look at. His knee was sticking well and truly up above, out of where it should have been, and it was pretty gnarly.
It reminds me of that HBO ad. And my head went that way, and my leg went that way.
Oh, he was in some serious pain. So hopefully short recoveries for those boys, and they're back in soon. But yeah, Walker's just looked awful and looked like he's going to be out for some serious amount of time. Same with Darcy's. Darcy's was a bit of an innocuous one. They're saying an ankle injury, but that's just to kick off the woes for Fremantle. They've got a lot of problems, and they're now sitting firmly in the bottom four. They're now sitting at a point where they've got a lot of questions in the off season. JL really needs to take a look at this team and go, I need to make some changes here. We discussed with Maso about trading Sean Darcy, basically to turn him into some other players and some picks. I think that they should be open to anything that could turn them into getting key position players that they require. A big forward, a big key defender to help Pierce. Just not anything like a ruckman. But
the other thing I can only see Freo offering Sean Darcy to someone like Sydney though, because they want Logan. They need a key forward first and foremost. Best key forward they have an option. They have the chance of getting is probably Logan McDonald because he's a Perth boy. I can't actually name someone else who'd be willing to go over Freo, especially if you're looking at their season this season. I know a key forward in the game at the moment who'd be like, Freo is a very good prospect aside from Perth boys. And that means McDonald for Sean Darcy probably makes the most sense.
JD's recommending what Collingwood did last year with Grundy. Get rid of Grundy to bring in 4 players to fill needs. And that's a good idea for Freo.
Well, we as we said, that deal ended up working beautifully for Collingwood. So it's maybe sometime take a page out of the like the trade book. Basically, you guys set it. Okay, here we go. Getting rid of a big time ruckman isn't the end of the world. Basically, they've got Jackson there, and Jackson has proved on many occasions that he can solo ruck. And I think he's almost at that age where he needs to start developing more as a solo ruck anyway, especially with the money that they're paying him. You don't want to just pay him to play in the forward line for the rest of his, you imagine if they give Sean Darcy a big long contract and then all of a sudden they've got to play Jackson forward line for most of his career. It's just not ideal. Like
Freo I
not a
reckon
forward.
Freo have signed Jackson to do a duo ruck role. Clearly, though, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't have signed Jackson with the idea of them one playing forward, one doing ruck. They signed Jackson with the clear intention of one being both of them rotating through the ruck in the same game. That's where I think you've got to toss up are they better as sole ruckman or not.
My argument back to that is that I just think that Jackson's at an age where he's had enough, because Sean Darcy's been out at various points throughout this season and proven basically on various points that he can solo ruck the game. So, he's basically proven that he can do it this year alone. So to me, it's okay, time to start sticking with him if the likelihood of Sean Darcy is going out, and then see what you can get for Sean Darcy as well. He's going to be a big proposition for some team, like you said, a Sydney. You could probably sway a Logan McDonald out of them for a Sean Darcy. It's something Sydney require. It's something Freo require. Although Sydney may hold firm, because also the other thing is Buddy's going to be going out, so they're going to want to try and keep a hold of any form of forward that they have at this point. But let's get into the game, because we've harped on enough about Freo again with their
list issues.
This day was again all about Collingwood. Collingwood have just absolutely. How do you even put it? Collingwood. Here you go. Collingwood doing Collingwood things.
Collingwood wins. LOL.
Pretty much. It's just you are the team to beat this year. It's become a point where you want to measure yourself. This is the team to do it against. And once again, they showed a team where they're at, and they really needed to. Freo really needed to show up and push Collingwood as best they could, but at the end of the day, Collingwood just too good. The spread, the Dacos boys. What more could you ask for as a Collingwood fan at the moment? You must be just sitting back and laughing your ass off, Nate.
Darcy Cameron to come back in, Myercheck to come back in. The only clash out of this game was the jumper clash. I wasn't there. My mate was there. He took photos of players like their backsides, and he couldn't distinguish either of them apart. It was because of Freo's sponsorship on the back was red, similar to Collingwood's Emirates logo on the back as well, and he couldn't distinguish them from the back. But Collingwood get the win. That's it. They have Port Adelaide next week, top of the table clash, and Freo season on the line against Sydney. Even though their season's all but gone, they're gonna have to win the remaining games with about 3 or 4 goals to get their percentage back up to 100 and have results go their way as well.
They just want to get themselves out of the bottom 4 in my books. You don't want to to them, a big fail is finishing in the bottom 4. So I reckon they'll be trying and fighting for their lives to get themselves out of there, especially after finishing in the top 8 last year and having such a successful season.
Well, especially when they've given up their first and second round draft picks to Melbourne. They're going to have to fight for something.
Speaking about teams that might be slipping into the bottom 4, St. Kilda.
Bottom 4? That's a stretch.
Did you see their game against Gold Coast?
I did. I watched the mini of it, but I don't think it was so bad that they're gonna slip into the bottom 4. But to be fair, Ross himself did say that if they play this way next week, they won't even challenge North Melbourne.
What I saw what I saw against Gold Coast was absolutely abysmal. Gold Coast had good pressure and had answers to everything the Saints threw at them in that first quarter. They did, and St Kilda looked absolutely lost for ideas. They were behind. They were late to everything. Gold Coast were on top of them. Gold Coast pressure didn't even seem that immense, but Saints would just still panic and kick it straight to Gold Coast players in space, and Gold Coast would just repel and send it straight back forward. It was. I don't think this is a case of Gold Coast playing well or new coach bounce. I think this is a case of the Saints playing poorly.
11-11-77, played 8-3-51, so Gold Coast by 26 points.
It's a Mountain Dew for Stewie Dew.
Oh. I wish I had some just so I could pour one out for Stewie.
Now, the most obvious blindside I've seen by any board on a coach in a long time. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, bud. It's been. You're not wrong though. It was probably one of the more. I mean, geez, it was one of the more blindside. Sorry, one of the more.
We saw it coming. We saw it coming last week.
New manager bounce, new coach bounce. It's a thing. It's a real thing.
It's pretty fucking obvious. It's Hardwick. It ain't going to be Stephen King, no matter how many wins he gets this year. No. It's Hardwick's job.
Stephen King could take him through to the final, win every game for the rest of the season, and Hardwick will still walk into that job, I reckon.
How about that 2004 Premiership reunion coming up for Port Adelaide?
Oh, jeez. I will say with Hardwick, no interview required.
That's what I said. I said that to John earlier in the week, though. I said Hardwick just replacing his Premiership teammate's job.
Throw in Kane Corns, Adam Kingsley, Byron Pickett's going to knock someone out. Fun times coming up for Port Adelaide.
Choco Williams is going to find a new role somewhere. You watch.
This game was an absolute. I was just going to say this game was an absolute mess for the Saints to fumble something this close to the end of the season. But I will say that the Suns do play well at Spermbank. They turn, as I said to you a few times this year, they're turning that place into a little bit of a fortress. Some real big wins, and now starting to cause some teams some real grief late in the season. So, big win for the Suns up on the coast. They were well and truly led from the front by Rory Atkins, which isn't a line that you hear every week, but
he'll get 3 votes, I suspect, and I don't think anyone would have predicted that going into the game.
No, but
I knew it was going to happen. No, I'm kidding.
when you're getting 32 and 2 goals in a very, like I said, a dominant performance, you're basically always gonna come out with a win. But once again, the Saints. This is a weird trend, right? And we brought it up a few weeks ago. Why do the Saints keep subbing off people who kick a goal?
I was furious when it happened. I think I told you at the time. I think he's done it again.
They did it again. He kicked the goal, immediately subbed off. That is the second time they've done that in as many. I believe it was 3 weeks ago now.
Ryan Burns.
Ryan Burns. Basically, same deal. Subbed off after kicking a crucial goal. It's just, you talk about, they basically were saying, like, here's your reward for kicking a goal, being subbed off. Even if it is tactical. Like, Philippou was somebody who, he actually looked like he was starting to get on a bit of a roll. And that's something that the commentators were saying. They need this. They need somebody like Philippou, who earlier in the season was bobbing up and kicking 3 to 4 late in the game. So, very weird choice from Ross Lyon to keep doing this to some of his players that are kicking goals. But that's Ross for you.
A couple of notes I had on this game is that Lukosius keeps getting better and better. If he was in a team like that was pushing for a premiership, he would be one of the focal points of that forward line. Tuke Miller looked more like himself as opposed to his return last week. That was really good to see.
Oh, Tuk.
If you ask Cooper Gretsch, isn't it Toik Miller?
Toik Miller.
It infuriates the shit out of me. But then I also made a note. This game was won for the Suns in the middle and in clearances. They had 15 more clearances than the Saints. and 18 and they had 18 more contested possessions, and I imagine that all of those would have been won around those clearances.
I've got the exact same notes. I'm not shitting you.
Fuck yes.
I do have to add one note. Nate, did you get up and about the fact that Bailey Humphries pumped up the crowd this week and they actually got up and about for him?
I actually didn't watch this game in full. It was actually a pretty bad watch.
Oh, it was awful.
I didn't. But the Saints, 27% efficiency inside 50. That's not winning your games of footy at all, no matter who you're up against.
Absolute no forward connection, which, speaking of no forward connection, the Power just really couldn't get going yesterday against Carlton. 18-14, 122, played 10-12, 72. Carlton by 50 points for the first time in their club's history, win 4 games in a row by 50 or more points. But Nate, this I feel like has to go to you straight up.
It's been 104 days, John.
104 days since I've heard this.
I've been counting. My hair's gone longer. My face has gone fatter. But I'll tell you what, it's Collingwood v Port next week. If Port dish up those performances, it feels like Kenny Hinkley's out the door. Kenny Hinkley is out the door. Hey, 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 hey. Kenny Hinkley is out the door. Kenny Hinkley is out the door. Hey, 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 hey. Kenny Hinkley is out the door.
The return of the uke. It's beautiful. I've waited. We waited so long. We have been joking for weeks at this point. Port went on a win streak the second that you started playing the uke. So
now
it's amazing.
Let me get my notes out of this game real quick because I want John to take over after this. Less turnovers, more direct, more efficient, better intensity, better pressure, forcing turnovers, killing teams on turnovers. And the next step for Carlton will be their structure. But at this point, the way Carlton are playing, not only are they a threat to finals, but they can cause some serious damage in September. But they've done this before. They've gotten themselves back in the hunt before, and they've just dropped out at random times. So I'm still going to pump the brakes. I think 2 more wins for Carlton, and then they're officially back, in my opinion.
Lids on until further notice.
Lids well and truly on. I mean, it's well and truly on because of I think because of last year. The lid has to stay on, but also
without a doubt, it has to stay on.
We're winning the fucking flag.
Flag blues.
No. Flaggers, mate. It's the flaggers.
The flag is all right.
Don't ask. I have no idea where that one came from, but it made its appearance after flag pies and flag mantle. What a performance by Jack Silvani. 4 goals, 1.
Son of
played
sauce.
Played in the ruck. Stepped up when it counted. Season on the line type stuff. This was a game that Carlton were basically. I think everyone had it. I shouldn't say everyone had us written off. Port made a lot of changes coming into this week, but before that, I reckon a lot of people would have been thinking on this calendar. Yep, this is just Carlton. This is the end of Carlton's fairy tale run that they've had the last 3 weeks. But we extended, and look at us go. We're randomly back in the top 8 hunt, just outside, almost guaranteed to get in as of next week. Based on of who's going to play who, and as long as we don't fumble the ball against West Coast, realistically, we're getting inside the 8 as of next week. So it's just a resurgence that I never saw coming, based on that 6 week period that I really felt like the season was done. I felt like everything had come to an end. Hockey was my only salvation, then the Ashes. But no, turns out Carlton had a little bit left in the tank. So just real proud of the boys with how they played. This game, once again, was all won in the midfield. We are dominating teams once again at stoppage, at clearance. contested possession. It's just stuff that we were doing as of last year. And to me, the bullies are back. Like, I know Nate never subscribed to the fact that Carlton were beating up teams, but it's at that point. But once again, you play this brand of football and you lose, and players start to get hurt, and that's exactly what's happening to Carlton. We're starting to get a few players get a few niggles. Adam Chera is carrying a little bit of a niggle. Mitch McGovern's still carrying a quad. I'm not going to keep going on about this game. I'm just excited to be back in it. It was an exciting day for the club. It was just a big day, led by the skip, led by players like Silvani, Nick Newman. Exciting stuff to be back in the top 8 hunt and actually half a shot to play finals. But I won't buy anything until we pass the Collingwood test.
The last time its side won a premiership, having conceded 110 plus points in a season 3 times, was Port Adelaide, 2004. So they're going to have to defy their own history to win a flag. Port Adelaide I don't know if I can chalk it up to Port having an off day or just, putting the cue in the rack for this game only and then just preparing for Collingwood. But next fortnight for them is a big test. They've got Collingwood in the showdown. We'll find out if they're a top 2 side or if they're going to be travelling around in 3rd or 4th spot for September footy. But very odd day for Port, but I did find a few positives, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the segments.
And you would have thought, especially with Mackay going out early with a knee, you would have thought that basically here's the chance that Aaliyah runs amok. Here's the chance that Jonas can find a little bit of form and get himself back in. But no, the Carlton forwards found a way to just basically run amok with players like Silvani, who couldn't fire a shot earlier this season. So, like I said, it's good to see Carlton back to their bullying best. But another team that was back to their bullying best was Geelong on Saturday night, up against your team, Jabs, Essendon. It was 18-14, 122, played 7-3, 45, Geelong by 77 points. Essendon lucky not to get done by 100 here. It was looking that way at various points, but Geelong started the game off with, like we mentioned earlier, with 7 goals basically to none.
Completely overran, and just that demolition. After that demolition, I reckon they still took the foot off the gas and absolutely put us away. The only positives I took from this were I hope Brian gets a couple extra games in the ruck. He's way too good to be playing in the VFL. He absolutely dominates in the VFL, and I want to see him get a good stretch of games here. But Geelong, and Wiedemann has to come out for Patrick Voss in the twos. Wiedemann, I don't know how the fuck he's still stealing a game from someone else on the list. He's been absolutely useless for way too long now.
7 games, no goals.
Exactly. And Geelong had 28 plus contested possessions, 25 more marks, 18 marks inside 50, and 15-4 contested marks. Like, it was just... They completely beat us at our own kick mark game. They completely beat us around the ball at stoppages and just completely beat us in every facet of the game for pressure and just being first to it. And it really put us back in our place and brought us back down to earth from where we're at. And that's, like John said, it's a loss we may have needed to have, but I reckon that might be the loss that takes the wind out of the sails for a lot of Essendon players, considering what they're used to dealing with. So.
It was funny, heading into this game, it was Essendon 5th, Geelong 8th. After this game, it's Geelong 5th, Essendon 8th. I will touch on Geelong just real quick. It was Brian Myers, game 100 for him. What more can you say about him? He's the Lionel Messi of the AFL. What the fuck, Jared Wheatley?
He never said that. He's been trying to find out who said that because he wants everyone to know that it was not true.
He's so pissed off. It's amazing.
It's great.
It was hilarious.
The fact that everyone bought it from face value, just hook, line, and sinker.
Did you see his celebration as well when he kicked his first goal? Did the Messi celebration?
It's amazing.
You gotta respect the bloke.
Gotta respect that.
he's cultured. He knows Messi. That's the main thing.
Just back on Geelong, Tanner Bruhn, Ollie Henry, Jack Bowes, Asafa, he didn't play, but Max Holmes, those sort of players who didn't play in Geelong's flag last year, they're at other clubs, or unfortunately for Holmes, he was injured. There's a bit of hunger in those players to push Geelong to another flag this year. I know they've had a rocky start to the season, Geelong, but they're well entrenched inside the top 8. It's only 2 points, but they feel entrenched inside the 8, and they can cause serious damage from 5 to 8. I don't think they'll get top 4, but they're a premiership side. They're a class above everyone else, and they're going to be pushing for another flag yet again, unfortunately.
As a key defender, I think Asav is probably one of the best blokes you could have coming into your team as well, and floating around being in the best 22. He's another one of those players who's way too bloody good for the VFL.
There was a bit of a gifted loss to the Adelaide Crows on Saturday night at the hands of just this little bit of an orange team that they're not too bad. This little orange team.
Oh, fuck them.
They've got a big sound.
They do, but 8-9-57 played 10-11 71. GWS by 14 points in quite possibly the game of the round. I don't think so. I mean, some people were hyping it up a little bit too much. I think for Fox Footy to flip it over, that was a little bit too much. They were like, there's a big game going on.
It's because one game was a blowout and the other one was sort of close until Toby Green kicked that. Was it Toby Green, I think, kicked the second last goal of the game?
I believe so, yeah. But it was a little bit too overhyped for mine this game. But yeah, Giants find themselves in a very, very weird position now. Who would have thought that Adam Kingsley would have had them basically knocking on the door of the 8 at this point? We've spoken about it at various points. The leaders not being up to par. Well, I can tell you now, I did not have on my bingo card this year Stephen Caniglio getting back to his what he's worth. His contract's worth. He has been every part of the leader they required. It seems like taking the captain off of him has paid off dividends massively, and giving it to Green, which, again, another amazing performance from Toby Green. 3 goals, basically willed his team over the line. You could just tell
Leading
this
from
man.
the front.
It sounds funny, but to say someone bleeds orange... But if there's one man that actually bleeds this club, it's Toby Green, and he like you said, led from the front. It was all their leaders, all their basically all the big name players that GWS has. All the leaders: Kelly, Caniglio, Whitfield, Green, all the players that we've spoken about who have, if they're going to get themselves to finals, need to stand up. And they've basically done that on Saturday night. But the big story for me was Taylor. Taylor basically taking Taylor Walker out of this game, won the game for the Giants over Adelaide. He was looking absolutely dominant in the first quarter and for the second quarter. But yeah, by the end of the game, Taylor had won the battle and basically pushed it to the point where the Giants had basically, he had an answer for everything, is the best way to put it.
The best intercepting defender in the game, I reckon. He reads it so well. He's 2 steps ahead of everyone. I saw the behind the goals vision against the Crows here. He was onto it before anyone could blink. And he's going to be the reason why the Giants are pushing for finals or being in the top 8 most likely at the end of next round. Big
loss for Adelaide, though, at home. Like, this is massive. This is where you put it perfectly. I think this is Adelaide. This is probably where Adelaide sits now.
9-12, yeah.
They're probably not going to find themselves getting into the top 8. We probably expected it. If anything, we thought maybe they'd get themselves into 8th. But you got to give them their chocolates this year. But give them their flowers, give them their chocolates, take them out on a date, give them a kiss. They have been a delight to watch, and don't want to be like, it's seasons for them. There's still every chance to get themselves back into it. But for me, this was a game they had to win if they were going to keep themselves pushing the 8. And unfortunately, they failed this test at Adelaide Oval of all places as well.
That's 2 losses to the Giants, 2 big losses that they should have won, and then they're in 12th spot. They face Melbourne next week at the G. Most likely lose that as well to fall into the bottom 6. We're going to say the Crows are in the bottom 6 next round when they should be inside the 8 at some point. But that's the Vortex for you. You need to win these games. Josh Rochelle, 2 weeks for being an angry boy.
Yeah, Lloydie telling him to pull his head in was quite possibly one of the greatest things I've seen on television this morning.
He's from Shepparton, so it's normal.
Lloydie gave him an absolute spray, and I loved it. It was quite funny. So, yeah, well deserved, though.
As long as you're not criticising Lloydie for being a fucking sniper. He was never a fucking sniper.
Oh, no, it's just more the fact that Lloydie gave him a cook, and it was absolutely, it was true. Like, Rochelle was going way too far. Like,
I agree with that.
He let the hot head out last night, and it was just unnecessary. Sometimes you just got to accept that the decision didn't go your way. But it was also the fact that later on, he was also still going at players. So you're like, just calm down, Rochelle. Like, there's no, he was, best way the commentators put it was he was begging for the MRO to send him away for a few weeks. So
he got his wish. 2 weeks.
Yeah, boy must have been looking for a holiday. But speaking of teams that are probably already looking at holidays, fucking North Melbourne.
Fuck me dead. Not many notes this week aside from everything we mentioned last week.
Wait. I'll get into the scores first. 6-4, 40. Played 12-16, 88. Hawthorn by 48 in what should have been an absolute Hawthorn demolition. If Hawthorn could have kicked straight today, they would have won by what felt like over 100 points. I don't think North Melbourne fired a damn shot.
They were absolutely... don't even think they showed up. Like Hawks had 74 intercept marks or something as well. It just shows that North weren't there for it for the whole day. They had no targets and were just all over the place. Warple's pretty good at footy, though. That was one of the things I took from the game.
Yeah, best on ground for me as well.
The old Warpedo. It's good to see him getting back into some form after he was basically shunted out for some other players like O'Meara and Mitchell. So it's good to see him getting back into some, because when I believe, I don't know if everybody remembers, but when Mitchell went out a few years ago with an injury, lo and behold, who steps up? Warple, and wins himself a B&F. So the guy's capable of pretty much anything, if allowed. So he's got I still think he's got a long way to go to continue that form, but great to see him get back to the form that I think we all know he's capable of.
15 losses in a row for North Melbourne.
Oh.
I thought they could win this. I'm at a point now, I can't see a win. Between North Melbourne and West Coast coming up, I'm going to tip West Coast. That's my early tip. I'm going to tip West Coast.
That's fair too.
I've had enough of fucking North Melbourne at this point. If we could put a ban on North Melbourne, can we please do it?
100%.
I can't talk about North Melbourne games anymore. It's the same fucking shit every fucking week.
Every time we're talking about the same things, they're lacking leaders. They're not showing enough, and they're relying on the kids to pull them through everything. And then you've got blokes like Wardlaw who are going out injured because they're not looking after them enough.
When Sheasel's your best player right now, no debutant should be your best player in your first season. That's not the shit on Sheasel. He's very good, but he should not be your best player right now.
No way.
Unless your name is Nick Dacos.
But he wasn't our best player last year. Not even
exactly. Actually, and I would agree with that. With that. And I would agree that it's like Walsh was not out. Even in Carlton's dark days, Walsh wasn't the best player in his first year. It was still Cripps. You always should have a player that goes past a first-year player. They just 100%. Don't have that. LDU's not that player. Or we all thought he was going to be. But that's the thing. We thought he was going to be, but he hasn't been. And like I said, I think somehow he found a way to take steps backwards.
Simkin hasn't stayed fit for half a season as well and has been in and out for most of the season, which if it wasn't going to be Davies Uniacke, it was going to be Simkin, and that hasn't happened either. So I just don't know how North are going forward from here, even with the return of Clarko. I don't know. They need to have a good long look at their list again at the end of this season.
It's Ben Mackay and Aiden Core as your key defenders.
That's why apparently Essendon's into offering 600 to 700 to Ben Mackay next year, and I just can't work out why you'd offer that much money to a bloke who's played less than 75 games in 9-10 years.
The big one for me is still losing that number one pick from last year. Losing Jason Horne-Francis was still the big turning point. Losing your first pick in a space of a year says all you need to know about a club. So, yeah, yeah, like we said, let's just move on. Props to Hawthorn. They're playing a hell of a season. Like, it's funny because you know how we always say, we were just saying we don't know when North's next win is. For me, it's Hawthorn. It's just like, it just feels like, the next one always feels like it's around the corner. And this is what it feels like again. It feels like they still feel like they've got one more in them before the end of the year. So Sam Mitchell's just doing wonders with that Hawthorn rebuild, and props to him. I as I said last week, I think, and even the fact that Connor could agree at the fact that Mitchell, what a coach he's become, because he's leading this Hawthorn team from the front. And like we said, it's just absolutely phenomenal coaching.
One more thing on North. They got St. Kilda next week. It was the worst game of the year last time they played. Can they step up at least? Can we put a ban on this game? Or because I've had enough of North. Let's move on.
Can we just call it a draw and split the points?
Unless North turn up, this is them on notice. Unless North turn up, they can have the treatment that Carlton had earlier in the season, where they do not get a mention on this podcast. They can get a name mention, and that's it.
Yeah,
no in-depth discussion.
At this stage, North have no excuse to look as bad as West Coast. No excuse.
Speaking of West Coast not looking as bad, the Eagles game against Richmond has just finished. So 8-12-60 plays 14-14, 98. Richmond by 38 points out west. Not getting the percentage boost that they needed, but this probably is a little bit more about West Coast just following on from North straight away. Like you said, Nate, I actually think that West Coast are a shot to beat them now. Because based on the fact that they've had it, we demanded effort from West Coast a few weeks ago as well. And they're starting to show that. The Sydney game was a real turning point for this club in terms of they weren't going to stand for losses like that. And that's almost admirable in that sense. That they went, nope. Obviously, behind the scenes, they went, we're going to change. We're going to try our absolute hardest every week. They said, to me, the discussion probably was, effort's the easiest thing to bring in football. And that's what they are bringing every single week. To only go down by 38 points to, like we said, not the best Richmond side that we've seen over the last couple of years, but still a very decent Richmond side is very admirable from West Coast. It's good to see them getting back into a little bit more of that effort. It makes the game a little bit more interesting when you haven't got teams that are just rolling over every week. But in that sense, Richmond have now got themselves firmly back in the hunt again. It's again, there's vortexes upon vortexes in this whole thing. Richmond are now, God, let me see if I can get the proper live ladder up. Richmond are now sitting in 11th spot with 34 points on 99%. Same as Carlton, knocking on the top 8. Anything's possible this year. Richmond could find themselves sneaking in. What do you boys think?
Firstly, shout out to Marlon Pickett returning to the scene of the crime. But no,
wish Richmond, we were over there.
I'll be at the airport. Watch this space.
See you there. I'll meet you there.
Hard-hitting questions.
I'll tell you what he had for dinner on the plane home. I'll tell you what chocolate he had. I'll tell you what drinks he had. I'll tell you where he's sitting and everything like that.
I'll tell you who he called.
We got you covered on that one.
Who took his RV home?
What place?
That was a good one.
All right, AFL House. Have I got an arrow for you? Travis Auld this week decided that he was going to leave AFL House and move to become the head of the F1 in Australia as the CEO. It was announced that he was going to be doing this at half the salary as what would be expected in his same role at AFL House. To me, this says you're all earning too much money and worried about you're worried about your own salaries as opposed to investing money into things that matter into the game, like maybe turning umpires full time and having a full time job for umpires that provides training and clarity on all the decisions that get made throughout the week and how they can improve, as opposed to the part-time job you offer them now. AFL staffers at AFL House should not be earning more money than any players in the game. They should not be earning more money than anyone else in a CEO role at another sporting organisation such as Australian F1, which is massive for the Victorian economy and Australian economy, and is massive. And F1 is a bigger sport worldwide than AFL. You need to have a good hard look at yourselves and figure out how the hell you can improve your game while taking away your salaries and applying them to the needs of the game, which is not what you've been doing for the last however many years now. That's my arrow.
Straight out of Caroline's arrow book, I reckon.
He's done well there.
Well in depth, absolutely. Well played.
It's funny. I said to him, I was like, I think this might be the best arrow we're ever gonna have. It's more in depth than we ever fucking go in.
Let's go break some hearts.
I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Holy Lord. And I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. Sing up, losers, come on. Holy Lord.
Holy Lord.
Kicked one goal, but first career loss. But Holy Lord, welcome to the boys' club.
You remember this, pal? You're a boy in a man's world.
It's a ruckman. So you know I love a good ruckman. He was drafted 70th overall in the 2005 National Draft, and then 3rd overall in the 2011 Rookie Draft. He played for 4 clubs. Would you like? I'll give you the 4 clubs, and then let you have a guess. Port Adelaide, Greater Western Sydney, Essendon, and West Coast.
Jay Giles.
It is indeed Jonathan Giles. So, as mentioned, taken 70th overall in the 2005 National Draft by Port Adelaide in 2006. He basically played no games for Port Adelaide in that time period. Was delisted in 2009. Was off a list basically until till the Giants came a knocking. And you know I love this, Nate. Anybody who's an inaugural Giant, you basically can find an inaugural son. I will find a way to get you into this list at one way or another.
And piss Maso off.
And piss Maso off. He should know this one at least because he played for West Coast. But played 51 games for the Giants, kicked 39 goals in between 2012 2014. Then went over to Essendon in 2015, played 3 games, kicked a goal, and went over to West Coast.
I'll make a note. He was absolutely fuck awful in most of those games. He lived rent free in my brother and my father's head and mine. It was horrendous.
And ended his career at West Coast Eagles from 2016 to 2017, playing 9 games and kicking 3 goals. Being delisted at the end of the 2017 season because he was not the first choice ruckman behind Nick Naitanui and Scott Lycett. And Nathan Vardy, that's true as well. But Jonathan Giles, welcome to the Hall of Fame.
It's Takeshita!
Ouch!
Do we want to go with the match first and then the dynamite, or
Did he get injured? Is all I need to know.
no? He did the senton on Rampage. That was it. But he'll be wrestling in blood and guts.
that's all I need to know. But
He'll be good.
nice little match on Rampage against Kenny Omega. Well, I know it was awful. Hey, we hype him up every time. But who was it against? Kenny Omega's former training partner or some shit?
Mantello. Some scrub.
Don't worry, Connor, you didn't miss anything this week. Takeshita Watch next week's going to be the one to watch out for. Blood and Guts.
Is that AEW or WWE?
AEW. But
That's on
basically,
Foxtel. I can watch that.
we'll tell you that actually, yeah, Blood and Guts. Tune in. Should be the final match of the card. Will be a giant steel cage match with 2 rings, and our boy Takeshita's taking place. Should be a decent little match, that one. But
Sounds alright.
yeah. I need to say one thing, Nate. I hate his fucking theme song.
I love it.
What the?
Oh, yeah, that's why I love it. It pisses people off.
It is just some random noise.
I don't get it. It doesn't suit him, but it's Takeshita. The jacket doesn't suit him, but he can wear it whatever the fuck he wants.
Big, tall, and sexy. Big, tall, and sexy. But that is Takeshita Watch. I'm going to say next week's the week to watch out for. Hey, Connor, give us a fucking random metal song for people to look up.
Yes, please.
All right. Here's my random metal song of the week. This is I'm already wrapping the beanie. I got the flag on the wall. We're going to be going with Ronan by The Gloom in the Corner. John is repping too. They're a local band from Melbourne. They've put out their last album towards the end of last year called Trinity. 3rd track on the album is called Ronan, and if you want something that's absolute mosh pit heavy and absolute balls to the wall with an awesome comic book style music video to go with it, that's right up your alley. Highly recommend.
Oh, I had this little idea with Connor, and I was like, let's have some fun with it. So
let's keep it going.
Yeah.
Got to start with Ronan.
We'll start there, but we'll leave it there for the week. So that's the way I wanted to end. So we are the AWO Journeyman. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram at AWO Journeyman. Like, share, subscribe, and please drink more water.
Mountain Dew for Scooby Doo.
He's fat.